Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. Allison Skyberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are excited to be partnering with Karen Mayer Cunningham once again. She is well known in the greater Houston area, all across the country, for her work that she does with schools and IEPs and 504. She is the special education boss, and we are certainly happy to have her here with us today. So today, I always like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. We're going from 12 to 1 today. We will be done by 1, so if you are planning, you can plan on that. As always, we are in webinar mode, which means that we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there, and we're glad you're here. We invite everyone to put their questions in the chat box today. We're going to get to as many as those as possible. Karen, I'll read those questions out to you. I'll pop back in if we have a question. And today's meeting is being recorded, so everybody that is registered for this meeting is going to get a copy of today's slides, as well as a link to the recording after the fact. So today we're talking back to school with a successful IEP. It's like, you know, when we first start out the summer, it seems like a really long time, and it just kind of flies by quick, and then we're back into the thick of it again. So I know a lot of parents have that on their mind. So having said that, we'll get right in. I'll share a little bit more about Consolidated Planning Group at the end today, but we're going to get right in to Karen and the back to school with a successful IEP. Thanks, Karen, for joining us again. We are so glad that you're here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. And thank you for what you do for families and financial planning. Back to school is, for me as an advocate, as somebody that was a parent of a child with a disability, should be our most focused time. And I find for most parents, because we're coming off of summer, and maybe we kind of forget kind of what the needs were during the year, we're kind of a little more relaxed. And I want you to kind of flip that paradigm. I know sort of as the year goes along, we have a tendency to get more involved and more tied into our child's educational needs, however that is, whether it's because our kiddos are using a combination of gen ed, special education, maybe a 504, an IEP. So back to school with a successful IEP, with a successful school year for 2023, 2024. And that is all predicated on the parent. And what I mean by that is that you want to fully participate and partner with the school. So we look at the first slide, it's back to school, right? And so this is what I always tell parents or school-based members. And let's just say thank you for all the school-based members. Probably 20% of my clientele are school-based members. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for serving kiddos. But this is an institution, education, public education, or even if your child's in private education, they have 1 million kiddos to serve. They have 1 million duties under their administration. And we sort of think, as we all do, that our cherub is the most amazing little cherub there. And that's probably true. However, nobody knows your child like you do. So when we go back to school, I want you to ready and partner and equip the teachers and the staff that are serving your child for a successful back to school year. So let's look at some of the things that I think are paramount when we come back to school. So we look at the next slide. It says medical. And I think what's important to know about that is we, as parents, we assume that the school knows everything. We told them once. Or as I always tell my husband, you think you told me, but you didn't tell me, right? And so anything that's going on with your child medically, the school needs to know for a number of reasons, whether or not it rises to a level of being a 504 eligibility or an IEP eligibility. It's important that we know for kiddos that have medical needs and medical needs that are partnered with medicines, change in medications. We would need to know if they have allergies. We would need to know if they need an IHP, an individualized healthcare plan, which any child, whether they're Gen Ed 504 or have an IEP, is entitled to an individual healthcare plan. Additionally, if you have a child that receives medication that is dispensed at school or should be dispensed in a medical situation, by law, you have to provide them updated doctor's orders starting July 1st of that educational year. So even if your child has always had epilepsy and the school knows about it, you need to give them updated doctor's orders to make sure that it's the right dosage, it's the right medicine. And then also we need to make sure the staff members know if they take certain medications, do they need a dose with that? Do they need to have more hydration? Do they need to have more caloric intake based on medication? So it's very important that we know anything that's going on with a child medically or physically. And that's going to be something that you get from your provider to provide to the school. And if the school might have a specific form that you want them to fill out, and then you would meet with the nurse to make sure that the IHP is properly populated. And then a copy of that IHP needs to go to all staff members. Love school nurses, but they usually keep all of their forms in their office in a little file cabinet. We need to make sure that the PE teacher knows and the bus driver knows and anybody knows if your kiddo is taking medication and the impact that's going to have on them. Next, let's look at the, go ahead.
Karen, let's just pause for a second, because you eat, sleep, and breathe all of this all day, every day. And, we have people from across the U.S. on here today. We may have people that have kids that are newly diagnosed, and they may not even know what an IEP is. And we may have people that's kids have never been in school. They're getting ready to start kindergarten, and all across the board. So just give us a little bit about what an IEP or a 504 even is, because in this world that you live in, there's a lot of acronyms and they're pretty confusing.
Yeah. And so an IEP is an individualized education program. And so we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit on the next slide, how you get to one of those things. And so evaluations are paramount for your child. The worst thing that parents say to myself or Allison is, we're going to wait. There's no benefit anywhere in life on waiting. And so if you believe that your child is not in the normed range of some aspect of development, which would include, but not limited to, academics, behavior, social, emotional, communicative, language, any of those things, if you believe they're not in the average range, then you would want consideration for evaluation. Now, that evaluation could be a 504 evaluation or an IEP evaluation. So the difference is going to be found out in the evaluation. So I would always ask the school, as you would send them an email, and this is what you need to do, Anita. You would send them an email and say, this is Mrs. Smith. This is my formal request for my child, put your child's name, to have special education testing. Areas of suspected disability are learning, emotional, behavior, communication. We look forward to coming in and signing notice and consent. I only and always want you to get evaluations for special education. Why? Because those evaluations do two things. They identify and they eliminate. And depending on those results of the evaluations, because that's the most robust evaluation that you can get, it will determine one of three things. Does my child have a disability but doesn't need more help, or not have a disability? Does my child have a disability that needs a little more help with the 504? And then does my child need help that rises to the level of special education, which is just a very simple way of saying it's a little bit more than solely the general education teacher can provide. And we have past webinars that will give you more information either on Allison's site or on our site, the Special Education Academy on YouTube. But you want to ask for the evaluations in all areas. And we have a robust training on that. If you have questions about that, you could always email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. But please, please do not wait. The one thing that you're never going to get back is time. And so while kids are not being evaluated, they're teaching themselves strategies to self-manage their disability, which may be working when they're little, but it's not going to serve them long-term. Do not be put off for your evaluations. We're just going to watch Allison. It's the beginning of the year. They're just coming back from summer. And then next thing you know, it's the holidays and kids are kind of out of order at the holidays. And then next thing you know, we just came back from Christmas break and then it's spring break. And next thing you know, we're back to the summer. So this is what I always say. Evaluations in an educational setting are equal to if you had a medical concern, right? So if I had my perfect grandchild this weekend, if he was running a fever, I wouldn't have said, well, we'll just wait till after the first grading period. No, I might have waited 12 hours. I might have waited overnight, but I would have gone to a professional that could evaluate him. And so that's what professionals in school do. And please, 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 as it relates to evaluations or anything, and I know that we all love school-based members, and because we get what I call too familiar with school-based members, we often get pulled into conversations that respectfully are none of our business about, well, we have staff shortages and we're running behind and da 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 da. And while I appreciate all that information, special education has always been short staffed since December 2nd, 1975. But I am the one responsible as a guardian, as a surrogate parent, as a parent, or as a grandparent to intervene for this minor child in public school to see what they need to benefit from their general education curriculum. So please, please, please do not wait on evaluations. Your child cannot afford for you to wait. Okay.
We had a quick question.
Yeah.
Would food allergies be covered under an IHP?
Absolutely. So food allergies are going to be under the IHP, is an individual health care plan. And the individual health care plan you don't have to be in special education or 504 or anything. If you're a child that has health needs that needs to be overseen by the school nurse, then you want that plan in place. And certainly we need to know the acuity of that evaluation, that allergy. In the little bit that I know from serving kiddos, there are so many different just nut allergies. There's tree nut allergies. There's all sorts of allergies. There's contact allergies. So they need to know that. So if they need to have a classroom that is nut free, or, those directives when we're doing snacks, when we're purchasing lunch, those are very, when people are bringing in, cakes for birthdays or holiday parties, it's really important that we know all of that, which is why it's important, if any of that's going on, that after July 1st, right, that we have updated doctor's orders, whether it's medicine or not, of their medical need that's on file with the nurse at the school in IHP.
Thanks for asking that question. That was a great question.
Yeah.
And before we move on from the evaluations, the question always comes up at the school evaluation or private evaluation. Do you believe in both? Do you have any preference or thoughts or ideas as it relates to that? Can we talk a little bit further? Because that comes up every single time.
Sure. So I'm going to require the school to meet their federal obligation and test them, because even if we get an outside evaluation, which I love, very often those are clinical evaluations. They have more language from the DSM-5 criteria, medical information. And while that's purposeful, I don't want to waste any time. Even if I always say, even if Allison showed up with an evaluation from the Surgeon General, the school has a duty, onus, and responsibility. Whether you're in Sacramento or Boston, the school has a duty to do their own evaluations as it relates to an educational need. So if you could even do them in tandem, just make sure that outside provider is not doing conflicting evaluations. But ultimately, the school-based evaluations are going to be the bulk of the information that we drive to make decisions in an educational setting. Okay. And so after we get these evaluations back, one of two things are going to happen. One of three things are going to happen. One, you have a child with a disability that doesn't need more help, or they don't have a disability at all. Number two, they have a disability, which we would put under a 504 plan. A 504 plan is simply a civil rights plan. And it simply says that an individual with a disability cannot be discriminated against receiving their accommodations. Or your child has a disability that rises to the level of an individualized education program, meaning that they need supplementary aids and supports and services, special education time throughout the day, possibly related or instructional services. We have goals that we're measuring. We have interventions, and it's a more robust plan. So I do about 500 IEP meetings a year and filings at the state and federal level. I can probably count on one hand in 25 plus years my kiddos that needed a 504, because both of the criteria is that you have a disability. The difference is, does your disability need somebody to give you instruction above the general ed teacher? And it would be very uncommon for you not to need that. And I think that you have to be very careful when schools are talking you into a 504 because you don't want that on their record. That would be very suspicious to me.
Okay, so we have a question. So if a school says that they accept a private speech therapist report and will not do another one, should I push the school to have their own evaluation for speech, for example?
So if they're going to accept the outside speech evaluation and begin speech language services, then that would be fine with me. But then, we have a legal duty every 3 years. It's called their triennial to do updated testing, which of course the school would have to be doing at that time. So that's called a related or instructional service. So if they accept that, that's completely fine. Okay. So the present levels. And so we're going to park here for a little bit. So this is a wonderful acronym, PLAF. I have a saying that I like big PLAFs, and I cannot lie. So a PLAF is the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. So academic achievement under federal law is considered achievement in those 4 or 5 core classes, right? Reading, language arts, math, science, and social studies. Or when we get to high school, just for math, English, science, and social studies. That's the academic achievement. Functional performance, the law would say, is anything else outside of that. So that could be language services, communication services, functional needs, dressing, undressing, ambulating, vision, hearing, counseling as a related service, physical therapy, occupational therapy, all those other components that could impact a child at school. You have to remember, when we're at school, we're looking for an educational need. We're not looking for an academic need. We're looking for an educational need. So I have lots of kiddos that have an IEP that do not have a single academic goal, because their educational need is emotional, it's behavioral, it's functional, it's sensory, it's not academic. So I want you to be very clear about that. A lot of times my families are turned away because the school says these 2 things. They have good grades and they haven't been to the office. Okay, well, if going to the office got you an IEP in 1971, I would have had an IEP, right? So we look at the data in totality, right? So that emotional behavioral piece is paramount when we're looking at kiddos. We all have emotional behavioral needs. So don't get sort of in that loop of, oh, he's got good grades. And I respectfully will say in July of 2023 that I do not give much weight to grades. Why? Because the pressure on teachers to pass students is unbelievable. And so when I went to school 100 years ago on a covered wagon, if I got a C in something, I got a C. There wasn't, I don't think there was retesting. I guess maybe if you were sick, you got to retest. But now in schools, we just retest and retest and retest and retest. We're testing and retesting. So you know what? I don't even know how he got a B. I have kiddos that are AB. Most of my kiddos are AB honor roll. I don't even know where they are anymore. They're just AB honor roll. So when you look at a grade, if you have an English language arts grade as a 3rd grader, well, we're going back to the PLAF, Allison. How many revisions did he do, right? How many times did he write that paragraph? Because what might be presented to the parent might be the final draft, but it might have been 17 times. Whereas the other 3rd graders, it took them 3 times. So we're talking about present levels. Present levels are the most important part of the document. And so I like for my present levels to have 3 Ps. I want them to be pristine, puffy, and prescriptive. Usually they're just pitiful, which is part of an alliteration I don't like. So that present level should tell me about this kiddo when he hits the door and when he leaves. It should be bell to bell. Sometimes it's going to be bus to bus. And what are his needs? Everything from eating, talking, communication needs, self-regulating needs, behavioral needs, counseling, dressing, restrooming needs, eating. There are kiddos that have eating needs that we have a dysphagia evaluation. So anything that occurs during the instructional day, we can provide instruction around that. It's not solely academics. One of the things that I want you to go and get from the school is you're going to be making up your own present levels now. And it's very easy to do. And these are the things that I want you to ask your teacher. I wouldn't ask them back to school night when everybody's dropping off their purple pencil boxes and their lasso for ag or whatever you're dropping off at school. I want you to email the teacher and ask them some really important questions. If you were my client, these are questions that I would have you get to me so I could better serve you. So pristine, puffy, and prescriptive. Pristine, puffy, and prescriptive. So here's what I'm going to ask the teacher. Who are my child's teachers? Most of us have no idea who the child's teachers are. We know one of the teachers, we know the homeroom teacher, If they're little, we might have a better idea, but who are the people providing my child an educational product? Who is the teacher? Who is the special education teacher? Who are the paraprofessionals providing him support services? If you're in elementary school, who is the librarian? Who's the music teacher? Who does computer lab? Who is the PE teacher? All of those persons have information about the present levels that would be purposeful, right? Not just the core classes. In junior high and high school, who is teaching their electives? Something else I want to know in a class, what is the adult to student ratio? Write that down if you're taking notes. What is the adult to student ratio, right? Because sometimes the problem is just in the numbers, right? Or maybe the problem is in the little numbers. Maybe you have your child in a too restrictive setting and there's just a couple of kiddos and he's not benefiting from being taught with his non-disabled peers to the maximum extent possible. So, and you're not crossing any, HIPAA or FERPA violations. I'm simply going to ask, when he is in music, what is the adult to student ratio? And you might have a second adult there, but that adult might be assigned to one student. And so maybe the reason your kiddo's not doing so good in music is it's loud, it's a lot of sensory, it's overwhelming, and there's 32 kids, right? One of the things I think is important for you to know is that maybe, just maybe, everybody at your school didn't receive your child's IEP. And so as somebody that represents families in due process hearings, I pull open records. And what I have found to be true from coast to coast, it may not be true where you live, is that we send out a thing called a teacher bundle. It's called a teacher bundle. And it's my experience that teacher bundle goes to the core teachers. So maybe Billy's PE teacher doesn't even know he has an IEP. Maybe Billy's, ROTC teacher in 7th grade doesn't know he has an IEP. So that's going to be paramount that you make sure that every one of them have a copy. Well, Karen, that's not my job. It is your job. As the parent, you are considered the expert in federal and state case law. So I'm going to make sure that everybody in the school has a copy of his IEP and the whole thing, because often in these teacher bundles that go out to teachers, it is the present levels and their goals and accommodations. Well, we spent a lot of time writing an individualized education program, which has supplements and it has an IHP and it has maybe extended school year or maybe a behavior intervention plan. I'm going to make sure that everybody working with my child has a full copy of his IEP. I'm going to provide that to them either electronically or in paper. So I would just email the school. The school district is back, the county, city, wherever you live. And you can just email the special education director. Can you please provide me a full copy electronically of my student's annual IEP? And then you have it. And that way you could give it out. You could give it out to the daycare worker. You could give it out to the bus driver. I want to fully equip the adults that serve my child with the information that they need for him to be successful.
Karen, let's suggest for a moment that some people don't have an IEP and they're trying to get one and they're starting the school year and it's 90 days into the school year before they get it. Do you have, if people are getting timelines that are much further out, like we're well underway here, do you have any suggestions for getting that moved along or to get that IEP in place for folks that don't have it in place already?
Right. So you can't move it along and you got to get in line. And there's always a line, right? So depending on where you are in the United States, the evaluation is going to take somewhere between 30 to 60 school days. So in Texas, it's 45 school days. That's 9 weeks. That's 25% of the year that's gone. So any child can have a behavior plan. So if there's an emotional need, we can go ahead and put that in place. A school will put a behavior plan in place. They can put in a 504 immediately. We don't have to have 504 is just reporting that there's a disability and writing the accommodations. But if I believe that there's a need, I'm certainly going to be addressing it and asking what supports that they can have while we wait for the totality of the evaluations to be completed and returned to the school district. Because not only do you have the evaluations, but at the end of the evaluations, the school then has another 30 calendar days to have the IEP meeting. So 9 weeks into Texas is going to be about October 15th. 30 more days is going to be knocking on Thanksgiving. So I really want you to visualize that. I don't want our kids to struggle. unnecessarily. They don't need to struggle. And so please do not be dismissed and say, we're going to keep an eye on them. That is probably the worst phrase that I hear in education. If Allison's child had a temperature, I wouldn't say, we'll keep an eye on them. No, that's not going to be acceptable. And remember, you're advocating for your child, and that's your job. Can you advocate for every child in the school? No, but you have to advocate for yours. Okay.
So let's just talk about that a little bit further, because it's I know we're getting close to starting school again. So for the folks that need to request, they're requesting evaluations, they're requesting, discussion of an IEP. Can they go ahead and request that in writing now to the school? Should they reach out to the school administration? How could they go about doing that? Here it is July 31st, so they could get a move on this, so it's not waiting until, September 1st.
Yeah, well,
what is your suggestion for that?
Yeah, so Georgia starts tomorrow. They start August 1st. I guess they have a robust football program like we do in Texas. So here's the email, and it's on a million trainings, but I would email the executive director of special education. If you happen to know who the diagnostician is at your school, that might be hard to know, or the principal, but I would include, since school hasn't started, I would include the executive director of special education, and then that person could get it to whoever. What's important about emailing is it starts a timeline. So once the school is in receipt of the email, they have 15 school days to do one of two things. They will either grant the evaluation or deny it. We're going to assume all things are amazing, so they're going to grant the evaluation. So here's the email again. Dear school-based members, this is my formal request for my child, Billy Smith, to have special education testing. Areas of suspected disability are emotional, language, learning. You can be very broad. I look forward to coming in and signing notice and consent. And that's it. You don't have to attach some statute or I know my rights. That's it. Once you hit send in the email, that's considered receipt of your request. And so don't ask for testing in person out of your mouth. Nothing is legal if it's not in writing. It needs to be in writing. And I understand school-based members at the beginning of the year that want to give it a minute. My child doesn't have a minute to wait. Okay. So they have 15 school days, calendar days to respond to you. And at the end of that, hopefully they will have granted it. They could do it a little bit quicker. And when can I come in and sign notice and consent? So notice and consent is they're providing you notification of the testing, and then you're providing them your written consent. They cannot test your child for special education and related services without your written consent. So only when the notice and consent is signed does that start the 30, 45, or 60-day timeline in your state. If you don't know what that timeline is in your state, you could just reach out to compliance at your DOE or your SEA. The DOE is the Department of Education. SEA is the state education agency. Okay.
So someone said, do we request an IEP every school year, or how often should we request?
Sure. So the IEP that you're requesting is going to get special education testing, right? And you can have new testing every 12 months. But you don't, once you have an IEP, you don't have to keep requesting testing. The testing, updated testing will come between 1 year and 3 years for updated areas. Okay. So again, it's really important that you're able to visualize your child's instructional day. Additionally, I'm going to ask for my child's instructional day. Now, when we go to 7th grade or high school, they give us a little printout. Here's your child's schedule because they have 7 different classes. I want you to also know, what is my child's schedule as a 7-year-old? It is important. A lot of times I can figure out exactly what's going on with the kiddo at 11:15. What happens at 11:15? Oh, writing. He doesn't like writing. Some of it is disability and academic or educational expectation that shows up, right? It's not a behavior need. He struggles to write. So I'm going to ask, please give me my child's schedule throughout the day. And I do it when I'm training people, literally, what time does school start? Okay. They eat breakfast. Okay. At 8:15, what happens? Okay. 8:15 for 20 minutes, we have morning meeting. Okay. 8:15 plus 20. Okay. At 8:35, what happens? And I literally am going to walk that down the page. Which teachers does he have then? So My job as a parent is to partner with the school. I can't partner with the school if I drop off my cherub and then just pick him up at the end of the day. Because what do parents say? How was your day? And what do kids say? Fine. What do you mean by that? Nothing. So I want the information from the adults. I want to be able to partner with them. I also want to put in the present levels, which is a legal requirement, parent concerns for enhancing the education of their child, right? If Allison's child does really well with the summer school worker or at a summer camp, let's talk about those things that were provided to her child that made her successful. All of that purview, all of our different points, we're called a multidisciplinary team, add information to continue for the child to be successful. It's not just on the school, good luck, but we have to partner together to make sure that they make expected gains in their educational product. Okay.
Karen, one thing that you said, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of was communicating and writing, which could be email. It could be a letter that you drop off. Email is fine. And a lot of you have volunteered a lot at the school. You have friends there. You may be best friends with somebody in the special education department. It doesn't matter when it comes to these types of things. Just think of this as like a business transaction and just communicating and writing. You have that paper trail. And also they're busy. They have lots of cherubs in their school. And so it's better for them to keep track of things as well. So that's super, super important. We have somebody in the chat box that says, I have a nonverbal autistic that has food allergies and he keeps getting exposed to his allergen and is out of school for a week, missing out on education and therapies. I'd like to request a one-on-one aid during snack and meal times until he can resist the urge to eat other people's foods.
So, I mean, so I'm very cautious with the phrase one-on-one. What I would substitute is that he needs adult support during this time. One-on-one can end up penalizing your kiddo. And so I understand the intent. So it's the same thing. We would just say he needs adult support during this time. While our job in special ed is one thing, to teach a child strategies to self-manage their disability. So that's an impulse thing, right? So we want to teach them a strategy to not do that. And so that's important. So I want a goal around that. And then I would want adult support during that time. I also would have a meeting and get the nurse back involved and say, is there another way to do this that he's missing so much instruction that's going to greatly penalize him. Okay. And so somebody asked in the chat, elaborate why one-on-one might penalize a child, because one-on-one is the most restrictive setting. So the law says under LRE, it says that we, least restrictive environment, that we educate students to the maximum extent possible with their non-disabled peers with strategies, supplementary aids, and supports. What happens when there is a one-on-one is it skews the data, right? So let's say that I am Billy's one-on-one. Well, I don't really know if he's doing that independent because I am suction cupped to his hip, right? So I certainly want adult support when the child needs it. If we have 400 minutes of instructional day and he needs $3.99, then I want him to have $3.99. But I don't want a support person, an adult, just assigned to one person the entire day. The times that I would consider a one-on-one appropriate, in my experience, is when a child is injurious to himself or others. But children learn so much from other people, right? The bulk of what we learn in the world is unspoken, right? If I go into a different house of faith and people behave in a certain way, then I follow their lead, right? I'm going to mirror what they're doing. If I go to another country and they have different, traditions, I really quickly pick up on them. So kids learn the most from their peers, right? And additionally, children get very attached often to the one-on-one. And then it's like, when do you fade it? No, because he's being successful. And I can't tell. The point of special ed is we deliver it, we deliver it well, and then we have generalization, maintenance, and fluency, and then we fade that support. And I find that adults and children become dependent on each other. And it's very hard to break that if we provide it over a long period of time.
Very good. Thank you for elaborating on that. We have someone said, my son is doing a half-day pre-K and general education curriculum in the fall. His IEP says 60 minutes of his 190-minute day will be in special education or general ed setting. Does this sound too vague? I don't know how to determine if he should stay in the general ed class or move to the special ed classroom during the day.
So I would be giving you a haircut over the phone, which would make your bangs crooked, but I can do that. So I don't have your paperwork, but generally, the 3 to 5-year-old program, ECSC, early childhood special education, is a gift. And I understand that people want, or school offers, general ed pre-K, but legally it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. There's no law that says 4-year-olds got to roll out and go to school. So often, not always, but often those other kiddos that are general ed may not have an identified disability, but they might be not English speakers. I want to know what the benefit is. If I'm looking at not providing specially designed instruction for 60 minutes, my question is always why? What is the point of it? So he can be with other kids. Well, he can be with other kids at church. He can be with other kids at the soccer field. He can be with other kids. So I want to know what is happening in that setting. I don't care what is the benefit of this child, right? Based on the acuity of his known eligibilities and his medical conditions. So I don't want a kiddo just with general ed because we can do that. There needs to be a point and a purpose and an outcome for him to be with other non-disabled 4-year-olds. I would ask what's student ratio, because a lot of times the ratio is high. What are they doing in there? They're playing. Oh, okay. Nothing wrong with playing, but that's not a legal requirement under education. There's certainly a benefit from socialization, but if your child met eligibility for ECSC, early childhood special education, they might have cognitive needs, they might have functional needs, they might have sensory needs, they might have language needs. Somebody asked me what's a high-low ratio. That's kind of a trick question, Bianca. It depends on the acuity of the disabilities, right? I could have 20 kids in my class that had dyslexia needs that would not have emotional needs, right? And I could have 2 kiddos that needed 3 adults. So it's really based upon the acuity of the child's disabilities. So it's really important that you get information from the team. What is the adult student ratio? Because sometimes that setting is not purposeful for your child, right? So I'm not gonna know the other kids' names. I'm certainly not gonna know their disabilities. But if this is a behavior class, then you can assume and presume that every child in there has acute behavioral needs, which means nobody is modeling age-appropriate behavior. So really take time to unpack that. You can jump on, the great thing about Zoom now is we can jump on a Zoom with the teacher, we can jump on a Zoom with the principal. We don't have to necessarily have a meeting, but are all of the settings we designed last year, right? Because an IEP, it usually overlaps 2 years. Is that appropriate for this child this year right now? Because kids change all the time. And we want to mitigate any loss because what we planned last year is not working this year. That's a good question. Okay. So the Zach Pack. So I don't know where I came up with this name, but 100 years ago, I had a kiddo. His name was Zach. And what I had my client do was get a 4x6 picture, a photograph of your child, right? And I would do this all the way through elementary school. I don't know that you necessarily need it older. And then I would write a narrative. So when I pick up a client, the most important thing that I get all their legal documents and the IEP and the 504 and progress reports and evaluations, and that's all great and everything. But here's like the keys to the kingdom is I ask the parent, what's going on with your kiddo? What do you want? What is the school providing? What do you think's working and what's not working, right? And out of that, I have the parents just write me a narrative, in a perfect world, what would you like? Where is Zach successful? Is he most moved by dad calling or mom calling, right? What will he work for? What will he not work for? What is his most preferred topic? What is his specialized interest? What is he not successful at? Why do you think he's not successful at it? And give that information to the teacher. These kids just all show up, right? And it would be so helpful if you said, you know what? He really struggles to sit still during writing. It's not that he doesn't like writing, but it's really hard for him to be still. And if you provide that information in a way that's just regular dialogue, it's so helpful for the school-based members, right? I love special ed paperwork. Allison loves legal paperwork, but kids aren't legal paperwork. They're little humans, right? And so this narrative, along with the picture, this is the great Zach, here's my email, here's my text. If you have any problems, let me know if I can support you in some way. Often there's this great gap between school-based members and parents, and there doesn't need to be, right? And we have, I don't know, 7 seconds on back to school night to, drop off our pencil cases. And is this his chair? And you misspelled his name. And it's just like a big, it's like the Christmas sale rush. And this gives the teacher, oh, this is Zach. This is what he needs. And mom said it's okay to shoot her an email. Mom said it's okay to text her. That is so helpful for school-based members.
So this is also, some people may have heard of this as like a one-page profile or a little resume kind of style format for your kid. So I have seen these, and I know that there's a lot of templates out there for them. You can create your own, but there are a lot of templates out there on the internet for that as well. I'm sure Karen has some as well. One person said in the district where we live, there's a co-op for special education where the children are sent to a fully different school, not allowing them to spend any time in general education for anything requiring more than speech therapy. To me, this is far too restrictive for a child that has dysgraphia, can read but cannot write. How do I approach this?
So again, the law, the least restrictive environment, which is a requirement, the legal actually component is called extent of non-participation. And what that means by law is the school has to provide the state language about the extent of non-participation. Dysgraphia is not a federal eligibility, so I have no idea why they would be sent to another campus. Another campus is when we cannot provide you an educational product at our campus. It's very rare for a child to be removed from their home campus. It has to be, we've exhausted everything we know to do for said child. So, I'm certainly not giving you any legal advice, but I would look into, certainly reach out to us. We have a team of advocates to do everything from just records review, right? I would get all of your records. I would review them, and then we would do a Zoom meeting. I would tell you next steps, testing, language I would use, and then people decide whether they want to go in with one of our advocates or they represent themselves. Unfortunately, what you don't know penalizes your child, which is why Allison specializes in finances. What you don't know penalizes your child. And so we have to get this right for your kiddo, but I don't see any reason why your child needs to be removed from their home campus for dysgraphia.
Okay, someone says, I have a child that's a senior this year and they don't have anything in place for transition. Should I keep her in the school or should I bring her home after graduation?
Sure. So by law, transition is a legal requirement. It's part of the 2004 reenactment of IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which says by the time they turn 16, we have to have written a plan, a transition plan that has a set of coordinated activities for the student to be post-secondary successful, which includes gainful employment, independent living, and further education. If that has not happened, you have been denied a full, free, appropriate public education and/or a violation of your civil rights. So I certainly would look into that, but your child should have already have a transition plan. A lot of states have actually increased the benefit of IDEA, and transition, as in Texas, starts at 14. So that would be greatly concerning to me if you don't have a transition supplement and plan.
I just wanted to reiterate, this is in the chat box of how to request an IEP. It's the email to the Executive Director of Special Education. It starts the timeline. They have 15 school days to grant the evaluation or deny it. Dear school-based members, this is my formal request for my child to have special education testing. I look forward to coming in and signing the notice and consent. So that is the way that you're going to.
Yeah, just a real quick adjustment of that. So you want to say, this is my formal request for my child to have special education. And then you need to put areas of suspected disability are. And then you put learning, attention, behavior, emotional. Because the law says that we're required to test children with suspected disabilities. So without that word, these are the suspected disabilities, you kind of lose that not triggering child fine. So certainly write that in there. It doesn't have to be exact, just learning, attention, behavior, emotional issues are fine.
Okay, and then someone said, can dysgraphia be a part of the dyslexia disability?
So often children that have been determined to have dyslexia, which could be a 504, it could be general ed or special ed, could also have dysgraphia, but they're different things. So under testing, there are 9 specific learning disabilities. And so when we do testing, we want to make sure that we've tested in all areas. cognitively. So I tell my clients, don't ask for a dyslexia evaluation. Don't do that, because you're just going to get a dyslexia evaluation. And that's one of the 9 SLD, specific learning disabilities. So you want to make sure that when they do cognitive testing, that they're testing in all 7 Gs.
Karen, tell us, if we already have an IEP in place and we want to review it or review progress, or we need an adjustment, how do they request that in writing? What is there some special wording for that?
Sure. So if you already have an IEP, I just got off the phone this morning with another client. We're just going to email and say, hey, I would like a review IEP meeting to look at my student's plan and progress. That's it. Please provide me 3 dates and times to choose from. We just want to schedule a review IEP meeting. You don't have to wait. This is your child. You are allowed to have an IEP meeting during the school year. And there's only 180 days in the school year. So this is not personal. This is business. This is the business of educating your child with a disability. Okay. And again, that's any of our advocates can help you with that. If you have questions, or if you have questions after this, just email us at advocate@specialeducationacademy.com. And so this next slide, review FIE and annual review. What I want you to do, moms and dads and parents and grandparents, is if you have a child with an IEP currently, I want you to go into your records and pull up the last FIE, the last full individualized evaluation, and pull up their last annual review. If there's any components of that that you fully don't understand, that you think is lacking, or the language is too general, then email and ask for a review IEP meeting. Or if you need support, whether it's records review or representation, special education is its own beast. God bless parents, period. But parenting a child with a disability is a lifelong commitment. It's very different than a child that does not have an identified disability. And unfortunately, sometimes special ed can be learn as you go. And we are certainly thankful for, Allison having these webinars, and it provides you information. But
Karen, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Your little thing says it's muted. There you go.
I can now. It was going in and out, but I think we're okay now.
Okay. Yeah. So you want to look at those 2 documents for your child that has an IEP. You want to look at their evaluation, and you want to look at their last annual IEP meeting. And if there's anything in there that's concern, or you think the school hasn't addressed yet, you want to call a review IEP meeting. That's the way that you get things done. And remember, kind of Allison said this earlier, the only thing that's legal is what's in writing and what happens at a meeting. You might play tennis with your teachers, you might go to church with them, you might be in the same neighborhood, but legal decisions only happen in a convened IEP meeting, a 504 meeting, or a meeting when you're signing paperwork for testing.
So in the example that a person already has an IEP and now there is a new diagnosis, that would be a reason to have a review and update. Is that
right?
correct?
So anytime that we have new data, what we call it a new consideration, whether it's, Allison had a speech therapist over the summer, her daughter's going to horse therapy, whatever is new information, we have a duty to convene a meeting to look at that information to see if we need to make any changes to their programming. Okay. And then the next slide, which seems sort of assumptive, are we assuring that what happened, what we agreed to is happening on the next slide, is what we agreed to happening. And it's our duty to partner with the school from the jump. And this is how I ensure that that's happening. That's probably the biggest fear for parents, is I'm going to email my child's teacher and say, we are so excited about 2023, 2024. Let us know if we can do anything to support you. At the end of every grading period, I will be picking up my child's IEP progress reports. I'll be picking up their raw data collection sheets. So when somebody works on an IEP goal, they write down data every week. I want to pick up the raw data collection sheets. While I understand that we get an electronic progress report, that's populated from different people filling it in, usually the case manager. But the persons that worked on IEP goals, speech therapist, occupational therapist, vision teacher, counselor, general ed teacher, paraprofessional, special ed teacher, I'm going to pick up the raw data collection sheets at the end of every grading period. And what does that do? That puts the school on alert that you expect their IEP goals to be tracked and implemented. And that helps you look at the data too and partner with them for a successful school year. And so we're going to open it up for any questions. And then this is, of course, is our mission statement. When we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. And it's our job as a total team to make sure that we're always doing that.
Karen, this is really good, and I think some of the things, and you said this really at the beginning of kind of getting it right and not waiting, and because the weeks go by quick. We were talking about that before this meeting ever even started today, about how the days are long, but the years go by quick, and it's so true. Yeah. And that's also true for our kids that learn differently as they're slipping behind. Right. And so, and you can make it up. So don't beat yourself up if you're already behind. It can be made up, but the time is now. I mean, I think that is the clear thing, and kind of working with the school. Someone said the raw data collection sheets would come from every teacher, like kinder, teacher, music, PE, art, library, or where do these raw data collection sheets come from? What if they ask the teacher and the teacher doesn't know? I'm not saying that they don't, but what if they say, I'd like the raw, data collection sheet, and they're like, do what?
Yeah. So, and everybody's IEP, you have IEP goals, right? Those goals are implemented by people. At minimum, every IEP goal has to be implemented by a special educator. And then almost always in an academic setting, there's gonna be a general ed teacher. So on the goals, when you're having your review meeting, who's implementing goal 1.2? Who's implementing goal 7? And so those persons are required to do one of two things: work on the goal, the content of it, and write data, right? That's all teachers do, is they teach and collect data to see if what we're doing is working. So that could be your speech therapist, occupational therapist, paraprofessional, special education teacher, general education teacher. It's probably not going to be the music teacher. You're not going to have an IEP goal in music. But the music teacher would be responsible for tracking their accommodations. That's also something you can ask for. A lot of people reach out to us and they feel like their child's accommodations aren't being tracked or implemented. And your accommodations have to be implemented RE, routinely and effectively. And every person that educates your child has to implement their accommodations, which is why it's so paramount that you make sure that everybody has their entire IEP document, because the music teacher probably doesn't have it, and your PE teacher is probably not running around with 200 kids with a word wall for Billy. So make sure that the people that implement the IEP do raw data collection sheets, and you also need to make sure that everybody knows and is implementing their accommodations. Those are good questions.
Yes, thank you. One person said, my child has a regional center caseworker and a caseworker with another agency that help with behavioral things. I'm supposed to be able to invite them to the meeting, but can they see their progress reports too?
Yeah, anything that a parent receives, they can provide it to anybody. So as somebody's advocate, they've already filled out an ROI, a release of information. So that release of information is for anybody that would have a reason to know about it and be able to add input.
Someone said, can you show a data sheet for the therapists and caseworkers? If they reach out to you on a one-off, can you explain what an example of a data sheet? I guess maybe they're all different for all schools. Is probably across the board.
Sure. So the software that your child's program is in, and all the software across the nation looks different. So inside of that software, they can generate a blank goal sheet. So the goal sheet will be in 36 instructional weeks. Allison, after directing explicit instruction, will write 2 paragraphs with correct punctuation and capitalization in 70% of trials. Okay. So then there's criteria in there, right? Directing explicit instruction. Maybe it says 2 prompts. Once a week, they're required to take time to work on the goal. So who's working on the goal? And that who is the person taking the data. So it could be on a cocktail napkin, right? It's 9/12. And we worked on goal 1.1. So how the school chooses collect it is completely fine, but inside of the software, it will generate a blank data collection sheet for each of the goals that you agreed upon as a committee. Teachers paid teachers have plenty of free data collection sheets. It's just a sheet that says goal number 1, you should put, I'm the speech therapist, I'm the physical therapist, I'm the paraprofessional, I'm the general ed teacher, so that we're all working to mitigate the impact of that child's disability.
So I think a lot of, families that have a loved one with special needs, I think some of us are programmed to be nervous about the IEP or the 504, about these meetings, or that the meetings are going to go wrong. And clearly, sometimes they have gone wrong for families. I mean, but I guess for people that are coming into this, when does a person need to consider hiring an advocate? Why would they hire someone like you? Like, when do they need your services? Just tell them how that works.
I kind of always tell the story. There's a reason that surgeons don't do surgery on their kiddos, right? There's always two people too close, the parent and the school, right? This is my specialty, just like Allison specializes in finances. So she probably doesn't change the transmission in her car. Could she learn to do that? Maybe, right? So you have enough to do. If you feel like you're being heard and you're a collaborative part of the process, you might want to consider the investment of a special education advocate. It's their specialty. They can take off extra time. But I think the most important thing is that most people are reactive instead of responding. And I'm one of them. We're all humans, right? And we react to something not going right instead of being proactive, right? Being active ahead of time and just saying, I'm here with you the entire year. How may I participate? Instead of waiting till February 12th when it's the IEP meeting and go, I'm not happy about what happened. Participate from the beginning. You're going to have better outcomes. If you get in a meeting, you're an adult, and you don't feel like you're having a meeting with adults, if you don't think you can have a good business meeting, then look at getting an advocate. A great advocate will change outcomes, will change the tempo of the meeting. And, there's a million reasons why things go wrong in meetings, but an advocate, that's their specialty. And I would look for an advocate that does that for a living. There are a lot of nice people that will go to the meeting with you, and that's great. But you need somebody that understands federal law, state statutes, and the applications and responsibilities of the school.
And I think that that's the key part, because there's all these different, she was talking about the 15 days. There's different day guidelines for like every single action that you do and what you're needing and all these other timelines. And so not trying to be a specialist at that, but good enough to get the things that your child needs, but kind of knowing how that works. I think I find that helpful. One person asked, is there a problem with pulling a child from school 2 days a week for ABA therapy?
So that's a really good question, and we need to talk about that. So if you were my client, and you're not, this is what I would recommend my client, is I would recommend that they make a decision. Do you want to homeschool your child? Do you want your child to go to private whatever, because that's what you've decided as a family is best? Or do you want them to go to public school? And really, those are the 3 options, because the law is, in Texas, we just passed it 2 legislative sessions ago. It's actually called seat time. And so I cannot expect or hold the school accountable to implement a free, appropriate public education when the parents have chosen, which is their choice, to remove them from part of the instructional day. We wrote the IEP based on the entire instructional day. Now, certainly if you have a kiddo that has profound needs, they're going through chemotherapy, they're having surgeries, there's gonna be times that you're out. And I think ABA is a great product for a lot of kiddos and families, but it is not public schools, and public schools are required to follow their Department of Education or the state education agencies, and we have to have them in school.
So, and I've seen some families with younger kiddos where they go to ABA 5 days a week as opposed to the public school, and they're gaining a lot of ground and they're speaking, but there's so many things that are happening. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of an individual decision for the family and how the child is functioning and things as well. So as always, Karen is the special education boss, and you always provide so much great information and tools for people. And the thing is our goal is we do a lot of advocacy. We have webinars on every single one of these topics on things to keep on your timeline as it relates to planning for a loved one with special needs. There's so many things to do, I's to dot and T's to cross as we're planning. But we are certainly wishing and hoping you a wonderful new school year and lots of excitement and things moving in the right direction for your student. Consolidated Planning Group, guys, we do a lot of advocacy, and you guys are going to get a copy of today's slides, and it's going to have all of our upcoming webinars. Karen mentioned that she's got all of her social media and where all of her stuff lives. She's got a whole bunch of content out there, so you do want to check her out. And we've got a lot of past webinars with Karen as well, where she goes deeper and wider on some of these topics, so you guys can check those out as well. We work on a collaborative team here at CPG. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. So we help families just like yours plan for the future of special needs. It's really, really important. Our situation as parents with a loved one with a disability is specialized, and specialized planning goes into it. It is really, really important that we have money in the right buckets to preserve eligibility for state and federally funded programs, to include Medicaid waivers. It doesn't matter what state you're in. That's very, very important. And it's really important that if we have a child that's going to have care needs for the rest of their life, not just the rest of ours, that we plan appropriately for that, and how much we need to fund a special needs trust. We're happy to work with you. We offer free personalized consultations. We can go deeper and wider, and I know a lot of people ask a lot of great questions today, but we can get kind of in the weeds in any specific questions that you have. And of course, Karen is available to reach out if you have specific questions or want a consultation with Karen. You can as well. All of the we're not doing any CE certificates today for any of the professionals that are on here as well. But everybody is going to get a copy of today's slides and the recording. So if you're listening to this on a podcast and you would like a copy of the slides, you can email us at contact@cpgcares.net. That's contact@cpgcares.net. Well, thanks everyone. It's certainly been my pleasure. Karen, we'll look forward to partnering again with you soon. Take care.
Thank y'all.